everybody's having a fantastic start to your week. I know I am. Anyway, I have had some questions and a couple of requests talking about tuning and different tuning related topics. So wanted to chat about that. Kay's checking in. Good evening, Kay. First in. So one of the things that typically comes up with guys is, what mods work the best and all this other stuff. And you really can't do anything that's really the best mods unless you have a tune. And there's some things that come with tuning that you just kind of need to know about. And so I'm going to walk you guys through basically the protocol of what to expect when you're taking your car to get tuned, and kind of talk about some of the more specific things about the tuning process and why some combinations take more timing than others. And well, primarily there was one request, please forgive me, I can't remember who had made the request, but wanted me to talk about timing tables and why timing tables look the way that they look. In other words, why is there more timing at the big end of the pull versus down low, and why is it basically that you just can't keep throwing timing at the car and basically keep picking up power? Like, why is that? So there's a lot to unpack there. So I can start with that, or I can kind of mold into that. But I want to check in with you guys here real quick and see what y'all are up to. Let's see. Already covered up Kay's first in. Good evening, my friend. Ryan's checking in saying, yo, what's up, Ryan? Mark's saying, hey, Mason. Frostbite Ram saying, what up, B? What's up, Frost? Spear Fit saying, hey, I always have the questions. I like it, man. Thank you, sir. Michael Coleon saying, good evening, Professor Mason. Got the arm flex. I like that. Moto X saying, Brian, what's up, Moto? 20's checking in saying, what's up, B? What's up, 20? CFL saying, good evening, B. Got the thumbs up and the arms are up. I like it. Sun's out, guns out. Sovereign Knight saying, what's up, B? What's up, Sovereign? Mark saying, wait, the B is for Brian? I never knew that. That's right. Anthony saying, good evening. Sovereign Knight saying, yep. Jonathan Slim saying, hey, B, checking in. Saw a video from Scavenging 1320 in regards to heat warping the lower air box. I have a JLT cold air intake. Can you answer how this works? Man, I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of heat warping any of the aftermarket stuff or the stock stuff for that matter. Yeah, that'll be the first time I'd ever heard of something like that. Jordan's asking, what amount of mods would you deem a tune absolutely necessary? Well, I'll tell you what, Jordan's going to kick us off with this. So, guys, listen, for any mods that you do outside of a Hellcat airbox, Hellcat filter, pick your cold air, it doesn't matter. Any mods that you do outside of that, and really, when I say mods, I mean engine internal mods, really, at this point, because a throttle body you really don't need. Maybe you might have to do a throttle relearn, but you can actually do that without any tuning software. Kind of do that on your own. I'm trying to think, ported intake and a throttle body, you really don't have to have a tune for that. But you start putting long tubes on that car, that's going to require a tune. A catback will not require a tune at all. Different air filters will not require tunes. If you want to just put a different air filter in your stock air box, you're good to go with that. Don't sweat that. But when you start talking about getting the most out of the combination, being able to tune your transmission, being able to actually go in and add timing and add fuel, raising rev limits, adjusting torque management tables, you're going to obviously have to have a tune for that. So basically, if you're putting long tubes on, you have to have a tune because you have your there is an exhaust pulse timing that you have to account for because you have a long tube header and the amount of time that it takes for the exhaust pulse to leave because the computer knows that when it fires that cylinder, there's a certain amount of time from that exhaust port to that oxygen sensor that it's going to take. And that's what it's looking for to read AFR. And to get the most out of your long tubes, you have to have the pulse timing adjusted to account for the long tube headers. So there's that. A lot of guys just do it and they kind of get away with not getting a tune for them. But realistically, the tune is going to help to optimize any gains that those headers would give you. So any better throttle response can be just even more so enhanced with the tune. But again, when you start to play with those type of modifications, you really need to be looking at a tune. So that's the reason for it. Again, it's not necessary if you're doing, a cleaned up intake, bigger throttle body. Sometimes the throttle body will need a little bit of love. Just depends. Some cars are more sensitive to it, but normally you don't. Let's see. Oh, obviously a cam. Anytime you start unbolting things off the engine, you need to have already had your computer unlocked and you need to have a tune ready to go. Let's see. John is asking, if the IAT reads a lower temp, does it reference a timing or fuel table? No, it doesn't. Wondering how much power you can pick up with cooler IATs. Not a whole lot. There's been guys that have tried putting it in water, like putting it in ice, like a bag of ice, just their sensor. It's not really going to make any difference. The main thing is that it's more of a reference than anything else. The car is not going to throw timing at it that the car can't use. If it throws timing at it, the knock sensors pick up on it because you start getting a little bit of spark knock because it's throwing timing at it, then it's just going to pull the timing right back out. And you'll see it in the knock retard. So there have been a lot of things done to try to hack a little bit of temperature sensors. I've never seen one actually work. Now, that being said, I did relocate on my 392 on Shalandra. I did relocate my air temperature sensor to the air box in a way. And the reason why I did that is because the 392s have a funny habit of heat soaking the sensor itself. And then you can end up in a hot spark table where it's pulling timing at launch. And that's something that I didn't want because I was taking the car to the drag strip a lot. Only in that environment does it really make any difference. And we're talking for more or less the 60-foot run. I honestly don't know that it helped a lot, but I sure felt better about myself after I did it. So, I would see these real high IATs, even with the Hellcat airbox and filter. A lot of times, if you let the car idle for any real length of time, you'll see those real high temperatures, spike up a little bit, especially if the fans kick on and wash everything with radiator wash. The heat coming off the radiator and from the fans would cook that sensor. So anyway, a good hit of the throttle and it would typically clean itself up by about the 330 mark and it was done. But just moving that sensor you could see it in the air temperature readings. But for the NA guys, no, you'll be in good shape. You're not going to be seeing a whole lot of gain just driving the car around. In fact, you won't notice any difference, honestly. Now, if the question is, can you pick up power with cooler inlet air temperatures? Yeah, you can. Again, there's some fudge factor in there. Yeah, the problem is that just like with anything, there's some gray area, and like relocating the sensor will do more again like at launch than it will. It's really just not going to help you at once you go to wide open throttle. After about 2 seconds, that entire inlet tract, especially where that sensor is on the inlet itself, on that pipe, man, it's getting hit with so much cold air coming through the inlet tract that again, you can just see that because it's what you're doing is you're going off of manifold air temperature also. That's the main temperature sensor that's the main derived number, I should say, based on what the temperature sensor is reading, that your computer is basing all of its hot spark and cold spark values off of. So again, you're really just not going to be able to get around it. Again, at launch, I can see where it can help, but after that, it's not going to be any major difference. And again, I mean, we were able to prove that over and over again with the cars at the track rental. I mean, granted, the air temps were low anyway, but you know, those cars at run after run after run it didn't matter if the fans were on or anything like that. The cars were all running within about half a tenth going down the track. Let's see. Okay, saying the Challenger he was looking at was sold, but he found a 2010 B5 Blue Challenger SRT8. That's a pretty car. They're saying, keep the good work up. I like it. Katie's saying, what up, Mason? What up, Kay? Summer's saying, speaking of tuning, Racer X did a video a couple of days ago about his Hellcat. It started to overheat. Turned out it was a 180-degree T-stat that was bad. He swapped it for a 170-degree one. He actually swapped it out for the Reich. It's the same one that I've got. And then Sovereign saying, had no idea you needed a tune for a stack. Yes, you do. In fact, a 180 thermostat in it, I'll put it to you like this. So if the question is, what are the mods that you have to, you know, again, what do you need a tune for? Again, if you're turning bolts and wrenching on something on the engine, chances are you're going to need a tune for it. And thermostat would apply here. So here's what happens. The computer knows that it has a targeted temperature for the coolant temperature, for the coolant. A little bit redundant. Anyway, if it doesn't see that temperature after a certain amount of time or after a certain amount of key on, engine off cycles, it'll throw a P0128 code, which is really annoying. They don't always throw the code immediately, though. Again, my white car, the Chalandra, threw the code about a week or two, maybe after I put the 180-degree thermostat in it. So it threw the code pretty quickly. The Mistress, Revlon, the Mistress didn't throw the code for months after putting the 180 in it. And it's true that a lot of guys have had problems with the 180-degree thermostat hanging up on them. I've heard this story more often than not where one of the more expensive 180-degree thermostats flake out. But for the guys that are just going to like O'Reilly's and buying a thermostat, 180-degree thermostat, they never have any problems with them hanging up. But anyway, mine, I wanted to try the Reich thermostat because I had noticed in data logging my car, there was a issue with short-term knock retard that the data that I had on my car, it just didn't support there being any actual short-term knock retard. The knock sensor voltage was just way too low. But there it was. It would just be this real annoying 1 or 2 degrees. Usually it was about 1.5 degrees that would pop up if the car went above 194 degrees throughout the run, which it will do with a 180-degree thermostat. Because you got to remember, with a 180 thermostat, you're really not getting full flow until about 185 degrees. So decided to make the switch to the Reich. And when I made the switch to the Reich, again, this is with a 170. I was driving that car around for a while before it finally threw the P0128 code. And that's as simple as going into the tune and just turning off that PID, basically, that parameter identifier in your tune. So it's just the computer saying, hey, I think your thermostat's stuck open. That's basically all it is. So in this case, I was able to keep the car from getting into whatever it was getting into with that higher temperature. And again, you have to adjust the fans to accommodate for that. But, you know, it's one of those things where you just have to know going into it that, yeah, if you get a thermostat, you're probably going to have to get a tune. Now, if you don't want to get a tune and you want to take advantage of some lower temperatures, I can tell you this. I don't know of anybody that has run into a problem with a 192 or 195 degree thermostat. So there's at least that to consider. I believe stock is 210, something like that. It's pretty high. It's pretty high up there. But anyway, the first step down from that is the 192/195. You'll see it marketed both ways. Basically, it's the same thermostat. The 180 is the one right below that, and then the 170/160 is right below that. The Reich thermostat is not cheap. In fact, it's probably one of the more expensive ones out there, but I've had zero feedback that that thermostat has ever given anybody any issues. Superior, man. Thank you very much for that, for the super chat. Bro, man, I appreciate that very much. Man, thank you very much for that. Man, I don't know what to say, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. But yeah, shoot me a question, man. If you got something, let me know. But thank you very much. Let's see. Let me get back up here. Let's see. Hilton Mode saying, what up, B? What up, Hilton? Chris is saying, what sort of gains can someone expect with long tube headers and proper tune? I'm talking about a 392 here. Well, what sort of gains you'll find? So the gains you'll find will be down low. They'll be from 3,000 RPM to about 4,900, maybe 5,000 RPM is where you'll see the biggest gains. And obviously the lower in the RPM range, the higher the gains will be. Now, a lot of that's going to come from the tune as well. So you can't really attribute all of it to long tubes. However, long tubes increase power production at low RPM. A couple of things going on here with the long tube headers with your 392 and a stock cam. Number one, low separation angle is very wide. So what does that mean? Well, it means you don't have a whole lot of scavenging going on. And that's really, or let me rephrase that. You don't have a lot of time, like tick-tock time, because you don't have a whole lot of overlap. And the higher in RPM you go, the less opportunity that there is for scavenging. Also, the higher up in the RPM you go, the more actually, believe it or not, it will favor your short tube headers. The reason for that is because the time from that high pressure signal coming out of the exhaust port going through the short tube header and then hitting your collector, when it hits that collector, and you have to think of this in like extreme slow motion because that's how it works. I mean, the time itself is irrelevant because these physical things are happening. So when that pulse at high RPM hits that collector, it hits a area that is lower pressure than what it is. So the gas slows down a lot, and that slowing down effect helps to drag anything that's in the chamber out. That's what scavenging is. Well, scavenging takes place at different times and at different amounts at different RPM. So with a wide lobe separation angle, there's not a lot of time that you're going to have overlap where the two lobes actually are, the two valves are open at the same time. And because of that lower amount of time being available, you have more scavenging with a shorter header at those real high RPM with that wide lobe separation angle. Now, at lower RPM values, you're going to have better scavenging with the long tube headers. So what exactly does that mean? So I don't really want to talk about horsepower or anything else. I'd rather just give you general driving impressions because the numbers themselves aren't all that impressive, but the driving impressions are noticeable. And in this game, at these power levels too, by the way, noticeable is more important than a power number. So what you'll notice with the long tube is, number one, just partial throttle application. Just tipping into the throttle, you'll have more torque. At very low air demand, you'll have a better scavenging effect with your long tube header. That's important because it builds tip-in torque. Basically, it feels stronger underfoot. Now, when you are getting on it in the car, at lower RPM, you'll feel the car have a little bit more power. And then that advantage goes away up top with long tube headers. And from your point of view, as long tube headers will start to lean, start to carry over and fall off, the stock headers will just keep carrying power a little bit better on the big end. It's not by a lot, and it's not for a very long amount of time either. You're talking about maybe a grand total of, say, 1,000 RPM, from 5 to 6,000 RPM, maybe 5,200 to 6,200 RPM. That's where you'll see the difference. But in terms of, so for that, for that money you spent, what do you get? You get better tip-in throttle response, and you get better torque down low where you're always driving the car. Do you get more horsepower? The only horsepower you're going to get is really going to come from the tune, and that's going to come from timing. So don't look for them to get you any horsepower. I'll put it to you like this, and I hate to say it like this because it gives the wrong impression. So just kind of walk with me on this. On the dyno, we have never seen any gains in horsepower with long tube headers, but the driving experience is always enhanced, and the sound of the thing is always enhanced. So for that portion of it, I would say that they are absolutely worth the money. If anybody tries to sell you headers based on horsepower, they are filling your head full of shit, and they're basically playing on the notion that you have been fed your entire life that headers give you more horsepower. Long tube headers give you more horsepower. And that's just not the case. And I wish, this is the thing, I wish header manufacturers would market these things more truthfully. Like, look, no, are you going to get horsepower? Not really, but you get drivability, you get bottom end torque. Where you're going to be driving the thing all the time, that's where you get your gains. Don't advertise a horsepower gain of X, especially when it's not just that part that's going on the car. There's also the tune that's involved. Now, in terms of horsepower gains from the tune, you're looking at somewhere around 10 to 15. It's going to depend on if you're on 91 octane, 93 octane, the quality of the fuel, it depends a lot on that. Okay, guys, but just know that there's a pet peeve of mine, and one of the main reasons why I started getting into doing all the testing, all the data acquisition, all the R&D that I do, I got into that because I got sick of folks asking me, well, how much power will I get with this? And me telling them nothing. Like, you're not going to get any performance gain from that. Just save that money, put it into this, but the only performance gain that you get is going to be X. And them getting pissed off at me, which is funny. I'm literally telling you not to spend money on your car. And they're going, you're going to take my money. And I'm going, okay, but I'm telling you what the results are going to be. So anyway, I'd already been kind of into a lot of the R&D. It's just it's in my DNA. It's something I did with the Fox body stuff. I did just an absurd amount of exhaust testing with the Fox body stuff years and years and years ago. And it just kind of bled into this, what I started doing on the Mopar side, testing all of the different intakes, with cats, without cats, track testing and dyno testing and just everything under the sun. So hopefully that answers a long way to answer that question. So, oh man, hang on a sec. GS1 1320, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. Saying I have purple stains around the water pump, ABS block, and hood latch on the hood. Still under warranty and not sure if it's common for coolant leaks. Not like that, it's not. No. Get that checked out, especially if you have it around the ABS block. On the hood latch, yeah, I would absolutely get that thing down there like immediately. It sounds to me like the cap may have been failing. One other thing that I have noticed is in some cases I have had caps get a little bit leaky. Try a different cap and see if the problem persists. But, you know, every once in a while, I'll get a little bit of dribble out of my intercooler, you know, the intercooler reservoir. But that was a long time ago when the car was basically had 0 miles on it. I swear that car was a garage ornament when I bought it. So, had very few miles on it. And that might've been part of the issues that the thing just never really either got up to operating temperature or something. But, that's definitely a coolant leak. And I would say that you need to get that checked out for sure, especially if you're getting something around the water pump. I would certainly take that in and that is something to be concerned about. No doubt about it. Jonathan, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. Saying race fuel for Revlon. Man, I tell you what, race fuel for Revlon comes from good old Exxon station, which is literally right down the street over here. What the hell just flew up my face? Good old Revlon gets 93 octane and she loves it. That being said, I have done the back-to-back testing with race gas with the stock tune versus 93 octane with a somewhat tickled tune, which is about the most credit you can give what I've done to the tune in Revlon. And man, I mean, there is some evidence to show that running a 260 GT, which is, for y'all that don't know, which is what's actually my trash can in here, running 260 GT, not GT Plus, 260 GT, which is the 100 octane, for the Hellcat will actually give some favorable results with killing some of the short-term knock retard. The stock tune is just very lean from the factory, and it rides the knock sensors a little bit hard. So in that respect, it does work. But thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Race fuel for Revlon. I'll tell you what, there's this little family-owned coffee joint that opened up. Place is called Crumb Cakes, right? They have the best Americanos and they make it just right. That's like my race fuel right here. So anyway, shameless plug for them, I guess. CFL, thank you very much for that contribution. Saying, looking for inside trade info on the STS Hoosier 305 45 17s. Well, me too. Actually, I will be testing another set. In fact, they literally just came in today. Unfortunately, I can't show them to you. Well, but I can, well, no, I don't have the other side of the shop isn't lit up. The boxes are sitting, actually, if I were to go Kool-Aid Man right through that wall, they're sitting right there. They came in today. I'll be getting some testing in on those tires. And then what I'm going to do after that will be compound testing. I am extremely excited about the results that I've seen so far. Again, I wish I could show y'all pics. I wish I could do all of that, but all I can tell you is that Hoosier is working very hard at getting those tires out soon. The STS line is extremely important to them, and it's been a lot of fun getting them this information. In fact, shit, that reminds me. I've got to do the write-up, the preliminary write-up, because these tires are getting mounted tomorrow. Yeah, in fact, they've got to get mounted tomorrow because I will be at the drag strip with them on Friday. So testing will commence. And again, I'll get all the preliminary weights and everything else on those tires. You know, just have my general report ready to go for those guys. I'm extremely excited. And like I say, so far from what I can tell, these are going to be really good. That's all I can really say about it. But yeah, CFL, you and I are rowing the same boat because I want the final version of these. I mean, the prototypes are cool, but yeah, I want the finals. Oh, somebody threw in a fiber, but has a message retracted. It doesn't say who did it. Let's see. And then Superior saying, I might have been Superior saying, can you please tell your thoughts about my package way above? It's in a regular message. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Oh, just blasting through here. Ashley Mills is in saying, if every star aligns, we might actually make it to HRP this Friday. But you know how that usually goes. We're in the tuning process now. Keep me posted. I want to see that thing make some hits, Ashley. Hang on, let's see. Oh, here it is. What do you think of this package? I'm all new to this. Let's see. EMP Stage 1 Hellcat. To unlock PCM, Mishimoto Thermostat. Go with the Reich on that one. 285 Pulley. Cool. Green belt. Okay. FIC 1200 injectors. You're going to go 13s on those. 6 HP tuners, MPU. You can do the tuning device. Absolutely. So here's what it looks like you're looking to do is just a one pulley setup. So here's my combination for a one pulley. 285. If you're on E85, no problem. But if you're on 93 octane, E85 can be a little bit on the edge in terms of what will realistically be able to be supported by 93 octane. So I would say 295 upper if you're looking to go on 93 octane. For E85 with a 285 pulley is kind of it is the absolute lowest. I mean, you can tune a stock car on E85. That's not, I mean, you can get some gains out of it, actually, throw all the time in the world at it. But a 285, you can really kind of start to see the benefit of E85 at that boost level, right around that 15-ish pounds of boost range. But if you're going 93 octane, stick with the 295 upper, and you won't have to get pumps if you go that route either, if you're going to go 93 octane, but you will have to get pumps if you go with, the E85 setup. And that the only reason why I'm even bringing up E85 is because you're bringing up the FIC 1200s, or really it's the fuel injector connection 127s is what you would get. When I see that size of an injector, it immediately triggers E85 for me. And if it's my car and I'm going to go E85, I would go with something along the lines of the Injected Engineering twin pump kit. It's basically just a plug and play twin pump setup that is great with E85. It's what we put in Racer X's car and has worked great for as long as I know up to this point. Now, at some point, the pumps can start to kind of flake out a little bit, but, I think it just depends on the quality of the pump. These are all Walbro pumps, so they're typically pretty good. It's just something you need to keep an eye on and log your fuel pressure. But, that's the route that I would go there. Now, obviously you have to unlock the PCM. And again, go with the Reich 170 thermostat with that. The belt's good. Yeah, you're in good shape. Again, 285 upper. If you're going E85, Injected Engineering twins. If not, leave the stock pump in play. Don't try to play games with a booster pump. I can already tell you how that's going to end. But again, my setup for the 93 octane, you don't have to remove cats. I would just basically remake like Robert Eden's, that buddy of ours that we're always at the track. A buddy of ours is one of the guys that's part of the three-way group that goes to the track all the time that I'm with. There's surprisingly little done to the car. I mean, it still has factory cats. It's running on 93 octane with a little boostane, but again, a 295 will get you almost the same results, and you can run it on 93 octane with no additives. Keep the air filter clean, keep the oil changed, and that's kind of it. Along, obviously with the tune and everything else. But anyway, that would be my suggestion, and that's a a 10.0 990 combination all day, every day. You know, it's like certainly 10 teens in lousy air and, you know, 10.0s and a high 9 in really clean air. It's just a really good combination. In fact, that's the actual combination that I had planned for Revlon. 295 upper, pin the crank, by the way. Don't forget to do that if you're going to leave the lower on. But it was going to be a 295 upper, pin the crank, 750 cc injectors, leave it on 93 octane, and just kind of let it ride at that point. And it would have, you know, picked up a little bit of power, not a whole lot, but it would have dropped it a couple of tenths, which would have put me in the 9s. So, you know, or at least 10.0s easily. And that's about as far as I would take these cars on 93 octane. And the reason why I say that is because these cars are heavy. These cars have got to overcome a lot of inertia, and there is no semblance of aerodynamic efficiency if you're driving a Challenger. These things are built like they're shaped like a brick. Chargers are a little bit better off in that respect, but it's still, they're heavy cars, and you've got to overcome a lot of inertia and a lot of weight to get them to accelerate. There's only so much cylinder pressure that the 93 octane can honestly manage. In a much lighter weight vehicle, you could probably get away with a little bit more timing, and you could probably get away with making a little bit more power, but you know, load is its own way of adding timing in a way. Increasing that dwell time at peak cylinder pressure. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question as far as that combination. And hopefully I was able to spell out a combination that'll work for you. Might be able to save you a little bit of money in the process to get that thing to run what you like. Let's see. Bear with me here, guys. Already touched base with Ashley. Chris B is saying with. We already talked about that with long tube headers. Brooks checking in saying, always enjoy the live chats. Thank you much. Multiple Mopars. My man is checking in saying that he's in. I like it. Dude, hope you're doing good, brother. You get your car down here to H-Town, see what we can get her to run. Mopar's got some a Hellcat with a bunch of nasty in her. I love it. Jonathan's saying, another question, and you're the man that would know. You mentioned the 19 392s run stronger compared to the pre-19s. I think they do. Do you think Mopar running slightly hotter tunes from the factory and keeping it hush? Well, here's the thing. This is just something that I noticed. The cam timing events are a little bit different in the new operating systems. It's not so much that the cars are making more horsepower in general, but I think throughout the curve at wide open throttle, the newer camming maps are maybe making the car run a little bit stronger. I'll give you an idea. When I blew up the transmission in Shalandra and we went back with a new transmission, that was my fault, by the way. It had nothing to do with the HP70 being weak or anything like that. It was just literally a series of events that I did that I could not help but have screwed up. So anyway, nothing to do with the tune or anything like that. It literally was me having my hand on the shifter. Anyway, I don't want to get into it. But anyway, I was the reason why I blew it up. I in effect, accidentally neutral dropped the car on the launch. So at any rate, when the new trans went in, for whatever reason, it wasn't Alex doing the tuning. It was somebody else that was there. It wasn't me doing it either, because the shop installed it and I wasn't there to have anything to do with it at the time. Anyway, long story short, they had to put the new OS into the car to marry up with the TCM. And for whatever reason, I still don't understand why it was like that. But when I drove the car with the new operating system, it felt punchier. And it felt punchier than the car did with the tune in it. And this was a stock tune. So fast forward to I don't know, say that this latest track rental that we had, when I drove Mrs. X's car, when I drove that car and it went 1157 with me driving it, I will tell you that my car stock would have never run an 1157, even with a drag pack like that. I just don't think that it would have run that number stock. Now with the tune, yeah, the car ran great. In fact, with a drag pack and some weight out of it, it would have been a 10, or a 10, my ass. It would have been an 11-teen car, certainly very, very low 1120s. But the reality is that it wouldn't have done that with the stock tune in it. So that's where I basically get that information from. Again, my car had that OS in it, ran great. That was the OS that it had in it when I traded it in on Revlon. But yeah, I got to tell you, just from my own personal experience, they are very strong. The 19, actually, it was for sure the 19 and up, maybe even 18 may have had that, but for sure the 19 and up has something else going on with that cam. Among other things, there could be other things that are running in the background, but that's the one thing that I noticed. Let's see. Ship is asking, any 1320 benefits with a carbon X pipe for a bone stock 392, and will I need a tune for that? I don't care about dyno numbers. You won't really see a huge difference, I don't think, with that setup. Not on a stock 392. The stock system is actually really good on the 392. The mufflers are basically, it's like having a MagnaFlow catback on your car from the factory. Anything that would happen ahead of those, ahead of the mufflers in this case, really isn't going to be that big of a difference. Changes in exhaust don't really make a huge difference for the most part with these cars. You might see a little bit of a gain here or there, but for the most part, you simply won't see big jumps in power, either partial throttle or wide open throttle. You just won't see the gains unless you've got a 5.7 or something like that, but that's a completely different topic altogether. Running the long tubes, like I was just talking about earlier, is also a completely different animal. But anything aft of that, I wouldn't worry about it, honestly. Not unless you start, throwing the kitchen sink at that car. Brother's saying, I sure wish notifications work for your channel. Me too. So I've noticed that. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. All of that will help get this content over to you. I know that the logarithms and everything that YouTube works with, I don't know how they work, but I can tell you that there are channels that I'm subscribed to, bell is rung, and I still don't get notifications, although I'll get notifications or something will pop up in my feed that I have absolutely no interest in whatsoever. I don't know where that logarithm came from, or that algorithm, I should say, came from, but yeah, I don't know, but hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the share, hit everything. I mean, whatever, if there's a button, press it. How's checking in, saying, hey, Master Mason, what's up? Say, I just bought a 69 T-Bird with a 429 TJ. Very nice. What should be the first couple of mods to make it faster? Well, first thing to do is change all the fluids in that thing. Secondly, the 429 was actually a decent enough engine. You can, just with anything else, take a look at Kasi has heads and cam packages for the older big block Fords. I would probably look at that first and last in terms of where I would go for hot rod mods. RPM, air gap, intake is probably going to be one of the first things you would want to do, along with, obviously a cam conversion to roller would be a better bet, but you can wake those engines up. The thing is, though, is that from the factory, it's really not going to want to spend more than about 4,000 RPM, in terms of making power. But you can make them make power. But that's why I say Kasi would be the first place, and the last place I would go. That guy knows his stuff when it comes to those old big blocks. And I believe that's still the same engine family as my 460 that was 10 over 460 that I had in my AC Cobra. It had Super Cobra Jet heads. One of the very first cams that I ever spec'd for anything was actually in that car. Had a single plane with an HP 850 carb on it. That thing screamed. Let's see. Superior's checking in with that combination. Hopefully I help with that, man. Mark's saying, had my first little Mopar versus Mopar moment. Me and Efros, Ty, and a guy in a Durango were ripping it down the street up here in Chicago. No traffic or pedestrians nearby, though, of course. Well, that will happen on occasion. For Shaken, say, getting cam installed this week. Anything I should be on the lookout for once I apply startup tune? Well, obviously, make sure all the fluids are changed. Make sure that you have a startup tune that is going to basically be good enough to get you to the dyno for your initial tuning if you're not going to be tuning the thing on the street. The main thing is just to take it easy with the car. You know, first oil change at 500 miles, second oil change at 1,000 miles, and just let everything machine in as you normally would. So that would be where I would start that. But really, there's nothing to look out for per se. Obviously, you know, you're going to have long tubes on the car. The things that you're going to want to look for once you load your startup tune would be look at your short-term fuel trims and make sure they're not completely out of whack. Stuff that you'll look for will be things like, you know, if you're adding, you know, 15 or 18% fuel at idle, it'll be a sure sign that you've got an exhaust leak. You know, just the general consensus is it's hard to tell because I don't know who did the startup tune. There's going to be lots to unpack with that. So just keep an eye on your data. Make sure that, again, short-term fuel trims aren't completely out of whack. And don't really beat on the thing, at least until you get a solid tune put on it that isn't your startup tune. Brendan's saying, my buddy just bought a 2012 911 Turbo S and he let me drive it. It's really fast, but to be honest, my Hellcat feels faster. Am I crazy thinking that? No, because 2012 911 Turbo S, I mean, they're great cars. But yeah, your Hellcat may feel a bit faster, but I can promise you that Turbo S it'll scare you with the way that thing runs on the freeway. So yeah, good car though. Oh, Superior's got more. Say engine trans tune. Yep. Crank pin. Yep. Got the ECU in there. Let's see. 3.8-inch carbon fiber drive shaft. I don't think I would go with that drive shaft. The reason why I say that is carbon fiber drive shafts of late have had a nasty habit of snapping, number one. And number two, anecdotally, okay, the stock drive shaft will actually take quite a bit of power. Now, it depends on whether or not you are taking the thing to the drag strip very often. And if you get into wheel hop, how hard do you let the thing go into wheel hop? My advice to you is this. I don't like recommending a specific drive shaft. The reason why I don't like recommending a specific drive shaft is because aside from stock, I haven't run into a drive shaft that doesn't vibrate on some level yet. Now, to that point, I know that the DSS drive shaft, the 4-inch aluminum with CV joints on either end, got really good reviews from Sean. I never installed it in my car because Multiple Mopars was kind enough to donate a Redeye drive shaft to the cause. So because of that, my good friend helped me out with that. I've got the best stock drive shaft you could possibly hope to have and should never have to worry about any issues with it. So there's that, I guess, to consider. But I would caution on the carbon fiber just because I know guys that have broken those. But if you're not going to the track, they might be okay. I just don't want to see you spend a ton of money on something that you know, you get going 75, 85 miles an hour and you develop a vibration with it, it's real annoying. I am so much of a bitch when it comes to that type of you know, like a vibration or, you know, anything like that at all. It will drive me absolutely crazy. The bushing kit, don't worry about that just yet with your car. You don't need it. Diff brace, yeah, I would say diff brace. Just make sure that when it's installed, your cradle bolts aren't just totally wrenched in. You want to just barely snug them up, just a little bit of wrench. In fact, I mean, like what you would have with your finger, have your thumb on a 1/4 inch socket with your finger, just whatever you can kind of just like that. That's about as tight as you want them. You don't want to go crazy tight on those cradle bolts. But of course, on the diff itself, you torque those to, I think most guys torque them to 85 or 90 foot-pounds. Boosting, okay, so again, 285 on boosting, you'll be fine. Okay, no question about it. But if you want to stay on 93 and you're legit wanting to stick with 93, number one, keep the boosting in the trunk. But consider it mandatory at that point. Again, a 295 with a little bit of a conservative tune, get 95% of the power with 0% of the issues with potential fuel quality for the most part. So just keep that understanding kind of playing around there for you. But hopefully that helps out. And I appreciate the contribution too, buddy. I really do. Sovereign Knight is saying, sweet. CFL saying, is the Whipple Stage 2 Supercharger for the 6.4 with 8 pounds of boost too aggressive for longevity? Should the safe move be the Stage 1 with 6? Well, the quick answer to that is, yeah, the safe move would be the Stage 1 with 6, but you can blow anything up. You can blow a stock car up. So there's that. Stage 2, 8 PSI is where I start to get a little bit queasy with the 392, only because it's really more of a potential transmission issue. But if you leave the stock tires on it, you should be fine. And, well, to be perfectly honest, fuel quality starts to come into play. I would rather have a 6-pound kit that I know that I can reliably drive the thing around indefinitely and get, you know, an extra 100 horsepower or so out of it. I would rather have that than try to go with another 130 horsepower, but potentially have issues with fuel quality, with, you know, potential issues with, well, the fuel quality will be the reason why it pops a ringland. You know, the tune's going to have to be a little bit more conservative with that kit, so you won't get quite the power that you're looking for out of that 8 pounds that you can maybe eke in with the 6. Yeah, it'll make more power, but I just don't, between the two, that's not enough power, to be honest with you, to really notice a lot of a difference. I've driven them making 10, 12, 14 pounds of boost. I can tell you that there wasn't much of a difference between 10, 12, and 14 pounds of boost. So, you know, you get that low into the boost numbers anyway. The power gains, although they're significant, they're not a significant percentage of the power that you're already making. So, for example, if you lay down, you know, 400 horsepower to the rear wheels and you put a 6-pound kit and it puts down 500, you picked up 25%. If you put an 8-pound kit and it makes 550, well, it's just not that much more of a percentage amount. And really, your butt dyno can really, honestly, only pick up on so much. And, you know, make it another 10%, I just don't think you'd notice it. The big difference is going to be in that initial hit, if that makes any sense. So going from 6 to 8, it's like, you wouldn't know the difference, really. Superior is saying questions above. Hopefully, I got that answered. Let me know if I missed anything, Superior. I'll definitely make sure I get on it. Mopar is asking, am I coming to Texas 2K? I will probably be there, maybe. I don't know yet. Actually, no, that's this weekend. I think it's this weekend. I will be there on Friday for Test and Tune. I think if they're going to be open for Test and Tune this Friday, now that you mention it, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know when it is. I should know these things, but unfortunately real life starts to take hold and I didn't keep up with it. I would like to go though, if for nothing else, just to see some of the circus that surrounds some of the stuff that's out there. There is some nutty fast cars that are going to be running around, but that being said, I won't be running around. I've been around long enough to know that when Texas 2K is in town, I basically let those boys go out and have their fun. I don't mess with it too much. Not anymore. Used to, not so much anymore. I will prefer to have my car not in impound, which totally sucks a lot. Let's see. Bear with me here just a second. But if you're going, let me know. Hit me up. Call me. Try to meet up, man. Speed Freak's asking, hey, B, could you explain why the throttle response changed when going from 262 to a 309 in a Hellcat? Wouldn't the 309 make it more snappy off the line? Nah, kind of. So here's the reason for that. The 262 offers up more mechanical load to the engine. And under your foot, under throttle, the difference is, remember we're talking about timing here, but when you don't have the load, you don't really see the boost. The car's just simply not making the same amount of boost because it's not under the same amount of load per throttle input. Less load, physical load on the car, and it's kind of like it's just going to free rev almost. You can kind of think of it from an extreme point of view that way. So when you put a 309 gear in the car, aside from going wide open throttle with it, it may feel like it's lost a little bit of throttle response, and that's the reason why. Where you will mainly notice this is, like, say you're rolling around at like 30 miles an hour, and you go to tip in the throttle, it'll just feel like it's a little bit lazy until you get more into the throttle where you're actually, you know, your commanded torque level is just significantly higher, and that's where the car will start feeling a bit more lively. But the reality is that it's a physical load based phenomenon where you don't have the load to press against, so you just don't really feel anything. You don't feel as much, I should say, and that's why. And again, pedal commander, pedal box, you know, just whichever pedal contraption you get can solve that problem, or obviously a tune can solve it as well. Prefer a tune to be in the car because you can adjust shift points and things like that, that the 309 will help you along with. But if you're not going to go that route, then obviously pedal box, pedal commander will work. And again, GS1, hopefully you get that thing sorted out, buddy, on your 2019 Scatty. Thank you again, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And then Sovereign saying, hit that thumbs up button for sure. Mopar saying the water pump and the black Hellcat failed last week. We had to rob one off the Demon to make last week's event. Dude, what? You got to be kidding me. How is it that I'm just now hearing about this? That is nutty, man. My man, what did you do? That is priceless, though. We had to rob the water pump off the Demon so that the Hellcat can make it down the track. That is too cool, man. GS1 saying, thanks, Molten Mopar. Let's see. Dr. Diff saying, what up, B? Seems like I was just talking with you. That's right. Hey, y'all, don't forget, Dr. Diff's got a channel, too. Y'all run over there. If y'all do a search for Dr. Differential and Speed, you should be able to find him. He'll be putting out some content as the year progresses. So y'all check him out and see what he is up to over at the shop. We were on the phone actually right up until I came on this evening. Alex Garcia saying, what's up with no one else but Lund talking about the EPA? Man, because the EPA only chases after those that have the pockets, I guess. I don't know. But you know, it's weird. The EPA was all over the diesel guys for a long time, and this tuning thing has been something that has come up fairly regularly. It's kind of one of the cornerstone issues at SEMA every year. It's you know, I don't. It'll come up, and it comes up in levels of severity too. Sometimes it's just worse than others, but there are those with much more experience with this topic than I have, and I don't really want to speak out of turn. I can only tell you what I know and what my experience has been, and how this topic has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years with the gasoline, on the gasoline side. I know that, again, with the diesel side, it has characteristically been a little bit different, because there's several other deeper issues that can come with tuning diesels, with all the different EPA and pollution and emissions control devices that they have with diesels. They're kind of the first one to go, but my wife was just sending me something. They're the first ones to hit up. What is she sending me? They're the first ones to get touched up, though, typically. Riff's checking in saying, "Hey, y'all." And again, CFL, thank you very much. And I'll let you know as I hear more and I'm able to let out more about those tires. Hilton Mode saying, "Finally getting around to installing the throttle body tomorrow. Does it need a relearn?" It's a good idea to do a relearn with the throttle body. Nice saying, "What up, Professor? What's your opinion on using Diablo Sport i3 throttle boost at 20% with a 6.1 Hemi Pro charge? If you like it, stick with it. I mean, I don't see any reason why there's anything wrong with it. A lot of guys like to ramp their throttles up quite a bit. And I can understand why, because one of the import guys just buzzed by. So for you guys that don't know, where this studio is basically right here in the middle of Velocito. And so you will have on any given night, especially if it's going to be a nice night, you'll hear the sounds of Velocito as guys are going out to various spots around here to go make hits. Rift is saying, "Trying to figure out if I can do the same thing on my 6.1 with the Diablo Sport instead of getting a pedal commander for it." Yeah, absolutely you can. Yeah, you can ramp it up. I mean, again, it's just the throttle settings for your command torque or driver demand torque that's a subjective thing. Some guys like it to be softer. Some guys like it to hit a little bit harder. And again, Superior, thank you very much. GS1 saying, "Oh yeah, I like it." Marco's saying, "What's up? What's up, Marco?" I think I already hit this one for Dane. Whipple Stage 2 Supercharger for the 6.4 with 8 pounds, too aggressive for longevity. It's not really a longevity thing. But yeah, I would say 6 pounds is good. It keeps everything safe. Ashley said, "We'll keep you posted." You better. Superior saying he was wanting to stay 93 octane. He said, "On the injectors, it's just because I go E85 in the future." You can definitely do it. Again, fuel injector connection 127s. Superior saying there were parts to that question for sure. Mopar saying, "We ran 9.3 last weekend in the black Hellcat. We still weigh 4,700 pounds with driver. No ice boxes, chillers, or nitrous yet." Dude, we got to talk about weight loss and how it can affect your ET. I love it though. Full weight. Big Nasty going at 9.3. I love it. Cody's asking, what are my thoughts? Saying, "What's up, B? What's up, man?" Saying, "What are your thoughts on Deechworks injectors?" I don't really have a lot of experience with them. I like to stick with the stuff that I know works, and that's fuel injector connection and fuel one. So stick with that, and you'll be in good shape. Non-X saying, what's up, Professor? What's your opinion on using throttle boost at 20%? Oh, I think I already hit on this. I say go for it. Rip saying, I have an HHP double fuel pump and ID 1050 injectors with just a 3.1 upper. Do you think I would be able to go down to a 285 pulley with that setup, or should I get the 1200s? No, you're good to go with what you got. The big issue here is, and this is something that I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. Anytime you put a pulley on your car, it's got to be tuned. And part of that tune needs to include bigger injectors. And I say that because I see the data on my car. And when my car is getting into now keep in mind, this is sea level and we get some crazy air down here. But when I'm getting injector duty cycle of 96, 97% with the stock injectors on my car, I would say that it's pretty important to be taking a look at putting different injectors on your car if you're going with boost, but in this higher boost levels. But in this case, no, you're in good shape. Don't worry about going to the bigger injectors. I would say, damn, talk to text. I know what you mean, buddy. This is the story of my life. Bob's asking, what do you feel about the one-way breather that replaces the oil filler cap? Any good? Yeah, I mean, they're okay. I don't really see them being of any harm. I haven't heard of anybody running any problems with them. I just haven't seen them doing anything in terms of making power or anything like that. So, I would say if you want to put one on your car, I don't see there being a problem with it, but I would probably say that if you're looking for it to gain anything or, for just performance sake, I just haven't noticed anything. But in all honesty, I have thought about putting one on my car. So there is that. Just because I'm not running catch cans on the Hellcat, and that might be a way to, kind of bridge the gap, so to speak. Cody's saying intake and exhaust in tandem can definitely help with power gains. Absolutely. Hey, Sean, he's in the house saying I'm changing over to E85 and now I test fuel. Yes, absolutely. The best I've seen is E78. Hopefully the warm weather will bring higher quality E85, and it will. So as the weather warms up, the fuel manufacturers will throw more ethanol at the mix. And the reason why is because ethanol doesn't like to light up when it's cold, like really cold. Gasoline doesn't have as much of a problem. And so when you're running an E85 only vehicle in cold weather, you can have issues with cold start. In fact, some guys have had significant issues with cold start on E85. So the fuel manufacturers will kick that percentage down to, actually the MEA spec for E85 is actually E70 to E90 is what you can expect at the pump. So super cold weather, it's going to be closer to E70. Really warm weather, be closer to that E90 number. Shift Nation's asking, can us early scats 15 to 16 get an operating system update like the 20 to 21 update without issues? What's funny is that mine had to be reprogrammed with a pass-through. But I don't see any reason why it would be a problem. I just don't know. I mean, if you're still under warranty, that may not fly. You'll still throw a 1405 code. I would say take a look at just the cam, the cam mapping and probably mimic that. If I remember correctly, it was quite a bit different. Shawnee's checking in with Rift and Dr. Diff. Let's see. Sovereign Knight saying, hit that thumbs up button for sure. Fighty's saying, thumbs up, I like it. Superior saying, and diff brace, so just want to practice. A diff brace for sure. Again, it's just I'm kind of particular with installing stuff like that because what happens is, if you can imagine, like my head is the differential, right? if you bolt something into the side of my head and then there's a brace right here, if you try to tighten that brace up, it'll kind of drag your diff down. And you don't want to tighten it up too much. You basically just want to kind of hold everything where it's at. You don't want it moving around or anything under heavy load conditions. Oh, Rich is saying, I'm not really liking the 309 diff I got for my cat yet, at least when it comes to around town. I'm just going to change the tune the same way that Pedal Commander does. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. And again, after changing throttle demand or driver demand torque, I ended up liking it a lot more. And in fact, I kept saying, man, this thing should have come from the factory with the 309. But you do have to throw some significant driver command torque. I think I'm adding, started off at like 10%, basically across the board. So just make sure you follow your tuning protocol, and whatever you do on one table, you have to do the inverse on the second for all of the tables. The Wolf's checking in saying, my 2021 Redeye Charger is on order to replace my 2018 Charger Hellcat. Dodge States 1050s for the Charger Redeye. What do you think? Man, I mean, you put that thing on a tire and you maybe put it on a drag pack and you get it into some really good air and you can get close to that number. I would absolutely agree with that number. I know that a lot of folks have quoted the 1050 number, but here's what I'll tell you. I know that it should run the number, but it's going to rely on really good air, really low DAs to consistently hit the number. Don't get upset if it just doesn't cover the number during the summertime or what have you. It's going to be very DA dependent. And I'll say that in DAs of around, from what I've seen anyway, from DA from around, I'd say 500 feet and lower, you should be able to be playing with that number no problem on a tire, especially with a drag pack. 9 saying, many people driving around with your advice tuned into their car. I hope so. Rip saying, I got a 10.6 in my stock 2015 Hellcat Challenger, so your Redeye should not be able to do that, if not better. Oh, yeah, so for sure. I mean, that's kind of one of those things. I mean, I will say this. So if you haven't driven a Redeye, one of the cool things about the Redeye is how they launch. The Redeye is going to be a monster through the 8th mile. That is really that's where that car puts in the best work. They will 60 foot like no other. But realistically, on the big end, it's not a whole lot different. There's a lot of heat nannies that are going to be kicking in. And it's just because that blower makes a lot of heat. But through the 8th mile, that thing's going to be difficult to mess with. And the way that I can explain it to you is like this. If I'm racing a Redeye and it's my car's identical twin, but it's a Redeye, the Redeye at launch, regardless of how good I may be able to launch that car, will always put a car length on me, almost, at least, if not, I'll be right on his rear quarter panel. So in essence, a car length on me out of the hole. And then I will, as the race progresses, I'll start to march around him. But man, if I get the light, I will win that race. If the lights are identical, I will win that race. But if I'm off by just a little bit, I will absolutely lose that race. And that scenario has played itself out. So just know that coming into it. That's the way that those cars run. They're a lot of fun to drive. Sean saying, I didn't notice a huge difference for the 309 around town. The car was basically very fast, but I did notice it on a time slip. The car is already overwhelming on the street. Yeah, and that's the thing. Where you will really notice is on a time slip. That thing will drag fifth gear all the way through the traps or all the way to the end of the quarter mile, that's really what you're looking at. It will bump mile an hour up, and it will improve your 60 foot on a drag strip. But I can understand where you're at with not being, you know, totally happy with it in and around town, because you do lose some of you lose that loading effect that 262 gives you. And it's really funny you mentioned it. That's one of the first things that I noticed when I put the 309 gear in my car, is going, man, it feels like it just felt lazy. But yeah, that's the reason why, is because command torque needed to be raised. Oh, Sean's saying 309 gears are nice if you want a quarter mile car. I still really like going with the 309. No regrets. So what I liked about the 309 was its ability to carry speed on the top end. The car would accelerate from like 60 to 130 significantly quicker with the 309s. I mean, it was just like night and day. In fact, I kept saying, man, this car really should have come from the factory with the 309 setup. I really felt that way. Oh, Cody's talking about the 2-liter EcoBoost and the Escape versus the Focus. Yeah, you can still do those mods. Let's see. Superior saying, did you say yes on the drive shaft for my package? Oh, if you're going to the drag strip, begrudgingly, begrudgingly yes, but go with the DSS aluminum with the CV joints on either side. If you're not going to be going to the drag strip, like you're really not going to be messing with the drag strip at all, I would say don't worry so much about the drive shaft. I just don't see it being the weak link here, unless you get into a ton of wheel hop and you're not getting out of the throttle and you're just letting that thing jackhammer back there. Then in that case, yeah, that'll tear up axles. It'll tear up basically everything. But if you're not going to the drag strip, you're mainly just playing around with it on the street, I don't see there being too much of an issue. But again, based on your power level that you're going to be looking at, yeah, you're probably going to want the drive shaft again if you're going to the drag strip, and maybe start looking at half shafts as well. But that probably won't be an issue until later on down the line. That is, of course, with the caveat still, and I keep saying it, of the wheel hop issue. So just know that coming into it. Oh, Rip is saying the problem that he had with the 309 is that it felt slow around town. No, I understand that completely. Rob's asking, do you think SRT will now be collectible since Stellantis is taking over? Not really. Again, I don't see there being a problem here with that. It's just basically kind of a rebranding thing. So remember this, guys, any of you Ford guys out there, what was it? SVT? Which one was it that quit? Damn, now I can't remember. It was SVT, and it was something before that. Anyway, it's basically just a rebranding. They're gonna more or less, I think, the way that I was understanding that release was that Stellantis was going to utilize the SRT engineering group to, in essence, raise all ships of the Stellantis brand name. Renault has got an unbelievably storied racing past, present, and into the future. Their resume is second to none in World Rally and in the hot hatch races and things like that. In fact, I was just watching some races where it was like Alfa Romeo Giuliettas versus GTIs versus the Peugeots. I mean, there was a lot of different cars in there. Again, they've got a really good racing history. I think that in this case, it's just going to be more of a, just kind of raising the image of the company in general. As far as being more, as far as being collectible, I'm not so sure. I mean, there's a lot of brands that you would think would be collectible that ended up really not, or really ended up not being collectible. A lot of them were Shelby cars. You know, I go, well, what are you talking about? Shelby's are all collectible. Shelby Dakota, Shelby Omni, Shelby Daytona. I mean, those are trucks and cars that, yeah, maybe to some they're collectible, but, you know, and that's a much more storied name than just the SRT. So we'll see. There's going to be some that may want an SRT branded car, but that's really not going to matter. I mean, it's just not. And you're still going to have, and don't get it twisted, you're still going to have access to Hellcat powered cars. It just may not have the SRT emblem on it for whatever reason, which is kind of dumb marketing, because that could have been Stellantis Racing Team, or, you know, Stellantis Racing Technology. They actually, what? Hi, Stellantis, B. Mason here. Here was some more free marketing advice. SRT could have been branded in such a more unique and fun way. Stellantis Racing Team. Anyway, you get the idea. But as far as just the letters being on there, it's not going to change. You're still going to have Hellcat powered whatever's coming out, no problem. Shift is asking, Mopar diff fluid comes with friction modifier together in the bottle from the dealer. Does that sound right to you for our 392? Well, I know you still need to buy a bottle of it. The friction modifier is what I'm talking about, to go along with your diff change. That's where your, I forget the dang, it's a 2 point something quarts. Is that what it was? And then your one bottle of friction modifier. So whether it does or doesn't, you still have to buy the supplemental friction modifier to go with it. Only buy the Mopar product, by the way. Don't try to use the synthetic for the open diff. Only use the non-synthetic limited slip fluid with the friction modifier. Let's see. CFL is asking, is the tune made with the Redeye when ordering it with a 309 where it's not giving you that Yes, it is. The cavitation fill, putting it in the Hellcat with a 262, like it just kind of lays over. Yeah, in fact, if you look at the driver command torque in a Redeye and in a Demon, they're identical. And they do have more driver command torque in that throttle map. Just in general, if you look at the throttle mapping, it is more aggressive for those cars. Superior Fit is asking, what is a drag pack and what does it consist of? I'm glad you asked. So a drag pack is what we colloquially will call bigs and littles. It can be slicks and skinnies. It's basically a wheel and tire combination. So that would consist of a wheel and tire combination that had a smaller diameter, 17-inch diameter here, with a tire with a tread pattern that is more set up for drag racing for the rear, and then a front tire and wheel, which is significantly smaller, and this is to facilitate a tire that is smaller, so you have less rolling resistance and the main thing, less weight. So that's where all that is coming from. So less weight, less rolling resistance type of a thing. All right. Summer Night saying, did you see that new hat Demonology put on top of his Supercharger? Yes, I have. He said it adds about 100 extra horsepower. I've never seen anything like it. It's pretty much a device that adds more air volume. Yeah, it is. I think that, coupled with all the porting and the pulley ratios that he's running, I think that may be the things that help. I've never seen results that are that high, but there's a lot of things that I haven't seen that seem to work really well. So, yeah, I would say that I have seen it. As far as would it work on a stock car, I don't know. I don't know how well it would work at power levels that are south of 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel, say 850 to the wheels. I just don't think anybody's taxing the capacity of that supercharger, at least in terms of flow. One other thing, just because I saw this recently, I have seen what some folks have passed off as ported snouts. What Joker's does with that snout is pretty impressive. What I had seen, I saw a couple of snouts that were ported, and it really just looked like somebody took some sandpaper and took some of the rough edges out of the like some of the casting bumps out of it. There was no difference in mouth opening or no reshaping or anything like that. So you get what you pay for. I was actually kind of surprised by that too. I had been thinking about pulling my snout off and porting it. You know, I mean, I'm already porting these intake manifolds, and I'm looking at the snout and I'm going, that's basically like me porting a 6.4 manifold. I just would be using different bits. And the more I got to looking at it, the more I got to staring at it, I was like, man, I just don't feel like doing that. I just don't think that at my power level, that modification would be all that beneficial. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it happening. Rift is saying, so I heard a few people say that the regular Hellcat supercharger is better than the Demon supercharger when it comes to adding more boost. Do you know anything about that? I know a lot about that. Rift saying, so basically the 2.7 compared to the 2.4. What you'll find is that the 2.7 just makes a lot of heat. The 2.7 is fantastic at doing one thing though, and that's making a lot of boost right now, right on the hit. But the problem is that all that boost with that supercharger comes at a cost, and that's heat. And it's evident in the tune in those cars, because there are so many heat-related nannies, at least one of which you're going to run into the second you put a different pulley on that thing. It'll freaking nose over at about the 1,000-foot mark. At Pikes, we're one of the first to find this out. We started tuning Demons and Redeyes. And so it's not too far outside of the realm of possibility that that level of frustration can kick off pretty quickly if you're buying a Redeye with the intent on modifying it. The Redeye, the tune in the Redeye is less aggressive than the tune in the Hellcat for that reason, from what I can tell anyway. It's based on discharge temperatures. To give you an example, at the same load range, like if you've got a Redeye and you're looking at a load value of like 1.3 for the air charge, if that value is 16 or 15 degrees of timing for a Hellcat, it'll be 12 degrees of timing or 11 degrees of timing for a Redeye. They really are off by a few degrees across the board. And again, a lot of that is heat related. And when you look at how the cars run, it kind of plays itself out like that. They are making more boost, but along with the boost, they're also generating more heat. Lower, you've got significantly higher temperatures coming out of the supercharger warrant the lower timing. And so that's where all of that comes from. Now, if you want to make a bunch of power, yeah, the 2.7 will make all the power you want to make and then some. The funny thing, though, is that a lot of the performance that you get out of having a Redeye, believe it or not, is how the thing gets to the 8th mile. The thing just is a monster through the 8th mile, and then will kind of lay low a little, not lay down, but it just it doesn't carry that same acceleration out the back end the way that the 2.4 does in the Hellcat. So I guess in short, the short answer to that is, yeah, I like the 2.4 better than the 2.7, but man, it's just like anything else. The 2.7 is just a lot of fun to drive. It's like a lot of instant torque, and it is noticeable one car versus the other in terms of driving them around. I will absolutely say that for a fact. The Demon, and I will go on record as saying this, the Demon to me is probably the happiest car I've ever driven in my life. It is just, driving that Demon around is I mean, the car just doesn't have a care in the world. 309 gear, super soft suspension, big supercharger with a lot of tip-in torque. I mean, it's just a treat to drive. So, and Revlon is extremely close to that with the way I've got that throttle mapping. So, Cody's saying, I just want to charge a RT with a Whipple without having to pay an arm and 2 legs because of the amount of need the RT. Oh, just with the how much their how much that RT is how much love it's getting out there in Vegas, for sure, man. Well, the thing is if you get a Charger RT and you want something with boost, man, look, just do this. And I know I keep pushing this. I one of these days I'm going to get a check, I'm sure, but I say that jokingly. The E-Force kit from Edelbrock. If you want a boosted 5.7, that's the route that I would go. I've seen too many of them do really well. I don't know who this is, but thank you very much, everybody, for being moderating in there. I didn't see what it was. Sorry, guys. I didn't see what that was. So I'm glad y'all caught it. I didn't see it. So we'll just keep moving on here. Goldborg 482 is saying, I have a 2020 Challenger 392. What is the best fuel? 91 ethanol free or 91 with 10% ethanol or 93 with 10% ethanol? Go with the 93. You're going to want to go with 93 because you want the extra octane. It doesn't really matter where you're getting it at that point. But especially with the warmer temperatures, you want the higher octane. Sovereign saying, what the heck was that about? Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see it. Cody's saying that guy lost to a Prius. Don't mind him. And then Bob saying there's always one. I don't know. What was that? So what was that a troll? First one I've seen in a live stream here. Oh yeah, we get them every once in a while. We've got enough mods on here between Dr. Diff, Rift, and a few other folks that they typically catch them before I get a chance to see them. So good job, fellas. Appreciate it. Cody's saying, don't worry about him. He lost to a Prius. That's too funny. Rift saying there's always one or two. Yeah, Rift and I got that guy out. Nice. So I know where I was going to say this. Let's talk about tuning. So the one thing I get I've had a question about was, can I talk about timing with tuning? And why is it that you throw more timing up top and why don't you have more timing down low? And it's kind of it's a real easy question. The higher your RPM, the more timing you need, mainly because your piston speed is much faster and you're just trying to get ahead of the curve. There's a lot more to it than that, though, and it's hard to go too deep into that topic. Timing is a pretty deep topic to begin with because it depends on so many different things, and you almost have to say, okay, well, we're going to start out with this constant, like we have an engine, okay, and that engine has a camshaft in it, and that camshaft it could be for anything. It could be for street driving, racing, it could be for anything, but the same principles will apply regardless of what the engine is being used for. It could be a tractor, it could be anything. So and so you almost have to start off at a weird place. You have to start off with wide open throttle. Wide open throttle is the easiest to explain because there's a constant in that the throttle is 100% wide open. But the big thing here is that at lower speeds, there's a few things. One, the piston is traveling slower to top dead center. So you don't have to initialize the spark, so to speak, as soon. Because if you do, you will have a high cylinder pressure at a point before the cylinder is just getting to top dead center and the crankshaft is on its rotation away from top dead center, where then at about 20 degrees, some will argue 10, but 10 to 20 degrees after top dead center, you have your peak pressure. Helps to drive the piston down. So when you take the timing value and it's too high at that point, the cylinder pressure will happen too early. It's actually bad for power. You just don't need the timing because the piston's not traveling fast enough. As the engine runs through peak torque, you will actually either flatten or lower timing slightly. Some tuners will call it a timing bathtub right there at peak torque. The reason why you lower the timing at peak torque with pump gas is because that is where your peak cylinder pressure takes place. That is where the inlet charge is at its most efficient in terms of stacking and cylinder fill. You're going to lower the timing because you don't need as much timing because you have such a dense charge of air in that cylinder as it's coming up. The idea here is you've got air molecules and fuel molecules all mixing in together. The tighter they are together, the faster the chain reaction can happen when the oxidation of the fuel takes place, burning. If those molecules are very close together and they're very tightly packed, that reaction is completed in a much shorter period of time than it would be if, number one, there weren't as much air molecules and fuel molecules to actually oxidize or combust. And so that's why you don't need as much timing. Again, I almost need a whiteboard behind me and props and everything else. But again, because of the efficiency of the air charge at peak torque, you will lower your timing because you just simply don't need as much timing there to keep that high pressure at that 10 to 20 degrees of crankshaft rotation after top dead center. Now, after that, as RPM increases, a couple of things are happening here. One, your piston speed is faster. So in essence, you've got to start this combustion process earlier because the piston's going faster. You have to remember that the combustion process itself is kind of a finite amount. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of variables, but just because the engine is going faster doesn't mean that the fuel will combust faster. It still combusts at the same rate. You just have more fuel, and because you are drawing in more air, you have more air to work with. Now, as what the rule of thumb that we just had was, well, if you have more air and more fuel, wouldn't you need less timing as the RPM goes up? No, because the piston is traveling faster and you've got to get out ahead of this thing. You're basically leading the piston coming up in the cylinder as RPM increases to hit that thing with the spark so that, again, you have your peak your peak cylinder pressure at your proper air-fuel ratio at or around 10 degrees after crankshaft passes top dead center. And again, that's just going to increase, that timing value is going to keep increasing as RPM increases. So that's why you see timing values look the way that they look. Now, when it comes to, well, if you have a different camshaft profile or whatever, it really doesn't matter. That same pattern will repeat itself. It's just that if you have a camshaft with a lot more overlap, if you have a camshaft with a lot more duration, your timing values will be higher. And the reason why your timing values are higher with that camshaft is because your dynamic compression is actually lower. And this is something we can get into. I know I've talked camshafts before on the channel, but it can just get real convoluted, and without stuff behind me to keep me in check, I'll end up sailing off into some other tangent and get off topic. But whenever you have a cam with a lot more intake duration, you are in essence lowering your effective compression ratio, which is to say that your compression ratio is the amount of air that the cylinder can draw in versus when that cylinder comes up from a static position. Pretend like the thing doesn't have a camshaft. It just comes down and then goes back up. The area between the piston and the cylinder head versus the area between the piston and the cylinder head at very bottom stroke position, that's your compression ratio. However, dynamic compression ratio has to do with the fact that the intake valve is still open as that piston is coming back up to the cylinder head. That's done to help to scavenge and to utilize the airflow inertia going into the cylinder. That's great for high RPM, and that increases efficiency at high RPM, and it also lowers pumping losses, which is a major parasitic drag on the engine. but it lowers your effective dynamic compression ratio. And again, lowering your compression ratio just simply means that, well, you have less air and fuel getting compressed. That's why you would ramp up your timing value, because those molecules aren't as tightly packed together. You need to fire that oxidation off, the combustion off earlier, so that that combustion can have the time to take the place in an area that it normally would have burned faster if it had a less aggressive camshaft. I know it sounds weird. There's a lot of stuff to wrap your head around, but hopefully that answers some of the questions about timing. The shape of a timing curve typically looks extremely familiar. Again, you'll have, from your point of view, it'll come up in terms of numbers. It may plateau or it may fall off slightly at peak torque, and then it'll increase as you go up in RPM. So hopefully I answered that question. Again, I can dive super deep into timing and timing values and the whys behind it, but suffice it to say that that tidbit is usually enough to have somebody understand it just in principle, and that's usually all you need to know. Let's see. Oh man, I lost. What the heck happened to my feed here? Sovereign saying, hey, Dr. Differential. Cody's saying, wouldn't more timing down low go kaboom faster? Actually, not necessarily. So what happens with timing, trying to throw a lot of timing down low, is that there's simply not enough air charge in the cylinder down low. You haven't drawn in a whole lot of air. So when that thing comes up, just because the piston speed isn't as high, you're not hitting the face of that intake valve as hard. You're not hitting the intake runner as hard. There's just not as much air, so not as much fuel. Not as much air, not as much fuel means that, quite honestly, down low, getting the thing to hit, you don't have to, because the piston's coming up slower. The initial thought is, okay, well, you need to hit it with more timing, but the fact that that piston is coming up more slowly, if you hit it any earlier, you'll actually overtime the engine and it simply will lose power. And that's pretty common. And the idea is just to take your timing in steps, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and just keep the piston speed in mind. There's two things in play here. You have an air fuel charge and you have a piston speed. And really you're leading the piston speed with the timing more than anything else. And sometimes adding timing can help, but again, if you throw more timing at it, there's more time for that air fuel charge to ignite, which means that low speed spark knock, by the way, is what you'll run into. Low speed spark knock is what breaks engines. In fact, low speed spark knock is probably more likely to have broken an engine than high speed spark knock, primarily because you don't necessarily always hear the knock from low speed spark knock, and it rattles the hell out of the piston. And because guys think that they can throw timing at an engine and just get more torque out of it. Doesn't work like that. And that's one of the things that happen is low speed knock is a killer for engines. And it's typically the predecessor of other tuning mistakes that can happen along the way that will cause those initial little slight damage, a little pit here or something like that on the piston that really doesn't matter. But that, coupled with other poor tuning practices in other areas of the RPM range, that's really what makes those things let go. Dr. Dave's checking in. Had to get some stuff taken care of. Let's see. Oh yeah, not with his tech, not me. Let's see. Got Doc Diff hanging out with some folks. Let's see. Dr. Different must be nice, AB. We want to do that cam profile timing class. My guys are anxious. I need to. I know. Saying maybe something we could do on a live feed, but it have to be an early live feed. Now, it's something I'd rather do live in person than a live feed. Sovereign saying, hit that like button. Yeah, hit the like button. Oh, Dr. Div saying we need to get an in-depth class in here soon. Hell, maybe get Pop's car in and Captain Scat's car in and compare compression on stock cam versus Joker cam. Should be a good difference. Should be a pretty interesting difference there. And a simple compression check will also show you the difference there, or can show you the difference, a running compression check. Ortega's saying, I'm about to get a tune on my 5.7 Hemi Challenger with the TR6060. It's a full bolt-on E85 car. How much do you think I will push, and do you recommend changing spark plugs before a tune with only 45,000 miles? Probably don't need to change the spark plugs. Full bolt-on on E85 on a 5.7, depends on the dyno. I can tell you that on a Mustang dyno, full bolt-on stock cam is going to make somewhere around 345, 350 to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. That'll put you at about 370-ish on a dyno jet. It's kind of hard to tell, but that's about the number I would look for. Cody said, I'm probably going to need an in-depth because tuning has always interested me, and I've been wanting to do my own tuning. It's not that hard. A lot of it's common sense, but the problem with common sense is that if you haven't been exposed to this stuff before, it won't be common sense. It'll all be new information. So for a lot of guys that may have just known this stuff, that they learned it somewhere. And for me, it was always just me being fascinated with how this stuff works. But my fascination wasn't concurrent with the amount of time that I had on my hands. By the way, this Americano is really good. But I did end up learning it, and just being able to understand it and have a conversation about it is, and having just the wherewithal of the process and how it works is pretty satisfying. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this. A lot of folks will say, well, if you know why the sky is blue, it won't mean as much. And it's like bullshit. That's the cool part about it. Knowing the science behind everything that's going on in that thing gives me a much more in-depth appreciation for everything that it's doing. It's like anything that I've ever gotten into, doesn't matter what it's ever been, I was always one to dive real deep into certain areas of whatever task, hobby, or whatever I was doing, just because the details are what excite me. It's not usually the end result, it's the process that excites me the most. So anyway, let's see. Ortega's saying hang on a second. Oh, he's saying I've got shorty header, 6.1 manifold, throttle body, intake, catless mids, E85, BMR suspension, 130-pound weight reduction, and 285s. The car ought to run pretty good. For sure, 6.1 intake's a good place to start. Along with that throttle body, I don't know, that 5.7 is also a good intake though. It just needs to be worked up a little bit. But yeah, I would still say somewhere around on a dyno jet, 370, maybe 375. It's gonna be tough to get much higher than about 375. Again, it's going to depend on how the dyno reads. So there's always that. But yeah, on a normal reading dyno jet, I would say it would be somewhere in that range. I know that the stock ones on a Mustang dyno, typically a stock 5.7 will put down somewhere between 3.25 and 330-ish to the rear wheels. That's pretty standard fare for those things. So once you start adding a lot of bolt-ons, again, the 5.7s react really well to them. I will tell you that, let me give you an example. and this is one of the reasons why I just keep touting that E-Force kit. And this is the pre-Maggie E-Force kit. That kit would lay down on a 5.7, usually around 435 to the rear wheels. And the reason why that's a significant number is because 392s would typically lay down a good tuned one around 420 to the rear wheels. So they put down a little bit more power than a 392, but they had instant torque and they were just fun as hell to drive. So that'll give you an idea. That's a low boost kit back then too. But that'll give you kind of an idea. You know, they would typically get about 100 horsepower almost to the number to the rear wheels out of those kits. Dr. saying, actually, we were pulling timing at peak torque. That's exactly what I was saying. You know, in other words, you'll see that the torque curve will either come up and plateau and then come back up, or it can come up and then bathtub a little bit and then come back up. Dr. says, live in person on a live feed. Absolutely. And Dr. Div saying Pop should make about 370 on a dyno jet. Yep. Cody said, I've only been exposed to building stuff. The only tuning I've had is basic knowledge at best. Dr. Div saying, B's all hopped up on Americanos. Yeah, man, Americanos legit. So for sure. Sovereign saying 435 is a healthy boost for a 5.7. Yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, man, I mean, everybody, I had a lot of people that were kind of like, haha, and I was going, look, guy, you don't understand. You can have a 392, which is great. You have a 5.7 making instant torque with that kit, making basically the same power, but it's got all the theater, it's got the whine, it's a supercharged Hemi. I mean, it's got everything going for it. What's not to love? Not to mention the fact you combine that with a limited slip 309, or if you really want to get freaky, a 370, and that's going to be a pretty peppy car to play around with. Just because it's going to be power like right now all the time. And that's one of the things, the one that I drove that really stuck in my head was a gentleman that, this car was clean to say the least. Little E-Force kit in a Go Mango orange, a Challenger. Real nice car, lots of fun to drive, and it was a 6-speed car too, and I really liked that car. Oh, Dr. Div saying, oh, talking to Cody, yeah, Alex Pites does do a private class. He was, yeah, at the tuning school. Very good info. Jamie's saying, so the E-Force kit is safe on a 392 with tight ring gap. Again, safe is a very subjective term. I will say that at low boost, the E-Force kit would be a good way, something good to look at for a 5.7. The E-Force kit on a 392, though, I'm not exactly sure would be the best bet. A couple of reasons. One, 392 with instant boost is going to be hell on an HP70 transmission, unless you're running stock tires or whatever. But even if you run that thing on drag radials, it's still going to put that thing at a fairly, I don't know if it would be intolerable, but you'd be fairly close to the limits of that transmission. So, and that limit is, at least on a Mustang dyno, what we were finding was about 535 to 555 pound-feet of torque to the rear wheels. But you're hitting an 11-to-1 engine in a heavy car on 93 octane with a lot of cylinder pressure down low to get the thing moving. That's why I would suggest, if you're wanting to go boost with a 392, that a ProCharger would probably be a little bit better. It's not going to hit it as hard down low, and you'll make better horsepower up top. Where that 392 starts to lay over a little bit, the Supercharger will push torque and horsepower out and allow the thing to make better horsepower on the very top end, where that the E-Force, although don't get me wrong, it's going to try to make power everywhere. The tune is going to have to be a lot more, let's just say conservative is is a mild way to put it with that 392. You just don't really get the same hit out of a 392 that you would with a 5.7 with the same kit. So just again, my 2 cents on that. 392, if you're going to go boost, stick with the formula and go with the Procharger. On a 5.7, I would stick with the E-Force, and I really wouldn't worry about a Procharger on a 5.7 application. I just really wouldn't. You're not going to tax the transmission, and at least especially not to the level that a boosted 392 would. And that 5.7 is just a freaking hoot to drive with that E-Force. Now, we'll tell you, if you're planning on going with a Procharger kit, prepare to be underwhelmed by the result that you get. Now, when you line the thing up next to a stock car, yeah, you'll just basically walk away from it. But the way that Prochargers hit, the higher you rev them, the more power that they'll make. In other words, the more boost they'll make, I should say. So your percentage of power goes up as you rev that car. But you don't get that initial like hard hit that you do with a positive displacement supercharger. The blower just doesn't make power like that. It didn't have the boost there to do it. So just word to the wise on that. Keep that in the back of your mind when contemplating putting that type of putting any type, I should say, of boost on your 392. There's other stuff at play. Bob's saying, so I have to run Nittos on my 19 Challenger Hellcat non-wide body. What's the biggest tire and what rim and offset on wheel should I go with, or can I go with no mods? So my thing is, I leave that, I'll look at it like this. I would say that a 20, if you're just like talking about 20s for the street, I would go 20 by 10, and I think it's a 20 by 10 and a half. I think it's a 25 millimeter offset, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what those are? I think that's what those are over there, the 17 by 10s. I just go with the replica 10 and a halves and let it ride with a 305, 35, 20. Now, I will tell you that if you're going to go with a 305, 35, 20, the Nitto 555 R2 is going to cut it close because that tire runs large from the factory. That thing's basically the size of a small 315, which isn't doing anybody any favors. And they work great on an 11-inch wide wheel, but if you were to just go with a 315 35, you'd be better off. I just don't understand the sizing and why it's wider. And here's the thing, the 10 and a halves, the reason why, the 10 and a halves, if you go with a Mickey Thompson ET Street SS, they fit beautifully on a 10 and a half inch wide wheel. There's no bowing out or anything like that. They're real clean, real classy looking tire on that size wheel. The Nitto Tri-5 R2, instead of being up and down, is actually kind of, you get a little bit of that tire bulge, and it's noticeable. And the reason why that's an issue is because on a Challenger, the clearance is just so tight in that fender well. But the other thing is that you're just basically wasting part of the tire. I mean, I've got chicken strips on both sides of that tire that are about 1/2 inch wide. Whereas, with the Nitto, the original Nitto Tri-5, it also sat just right on that rim. You just didn't have that same problem. Again, Mickey Thompson's the same way. Nitto, for whatever reason, I still don't understand, does not make the NT05 in the 305, 35, 20, which would be like a go-to tire. So you're left kind of, there's not a whole lot of choices, at least not yet. So I would say if you're planning on going that route, just know that there is a difference between the Tri-5R and the ET Street SS. And unfortunately, the regular Tri-5 looks like it's just not available. And that was between the three, the Tri-5 would have been my first choice for a more, road trip type tire. And then the ET Street SS just for fitment. But as far as it just being a tire, the Nitto Tri-5 R2 is a great tire. it just suffers from being a little bit froggy looking in the back, which again, for the Challenger guys can pose a problem. But if you've got an 11-inch wide wheel, it works great. Problem is 11-inch wide wheels don't really fit that great on the back of these cars. So again, we're talking no modification needed. Tire choice might be a bit of a thing there for you. Dr. Diff saying, I've got a 308 open at the shop if anybody needs it. Yeah, you definitely go that route. If you got a 262 open and just want to upgrade it. Cody saying, I wish I could learn from a teacher, Dr. Diff, but I don't have the opportunity. I work and take care of my mom, so it's going to be hard for me to fit that into the schedule. I understand that. Dr. Diff's hanging out with Cody. Let's see. Dr. Diff will take care of that. Sovereign saying, on Racer X's 5.0, I was thinking a supercharger would be better to give it the low-end boost. Does that sound like the ideal setup, or a ProCharger would be a better match? What do I think would be best for his car? So best, again, is subjective. I prefer positive displacement with 5 liters. For the drive, like at the drag strip, like a Whipple setup on a 5 liter is really, really good. It's tough to beat. But I've got to admit that if you've never driven a 5.0, if you've never driven a Coyote with a ProCharger, you're missing out, because those things with a decent amount of boost, say, 10, 12, 14 pounds of boost, pull like you have never experienced before on the big end. It is a completely different drive than what you may be used to. If you have a Hellcat, it'll be, what's going on? I don't really, what the shit? I mean, the thing just comes alive after about 4,500 RPM, and it'll pull to 75. So that'll give you an idea as far as what's going on. I mean, it just stacks and stacks and stacks boost on the big end, and it's real difficult to mess with one of those cars. That's one of the main reasons why when you see one of those things at the track, they don't necessarily look like they hit super hard off the line, because they don't. But the faster they go, and they just never nose over. That thing will be pulling super hard through the traps. What would I do if it were my car? Man, that's tough to say. I like the positive displacement just because they're a little bit more fun to drive, but positive displacement's a lot harder on drivetrain parts. For me, I would probably go ProCharger, just because it kind of plays into the hand of the Coyote's high revving nature. If twin turbos were simply not an option. Obviously, turbos are always going to be the most efficient, but they are not necessarily the most fun to drive. So, I mean, when they come on really strong. They're great for drag racing, but just playing around, especially if it's a manual transmission car, I would definitely go with that ProCharger. On automatic, I would lean a lot more to, like Racer X's car, I'd lean a lot more to turbos and positive displacement. But that's just the drag racer in me. Let's see. Dr. Div saying VMP blower for the win. They do run good, man. Definitely run good. Again, it just depends on what you're doing with. If you're playing around with it on the street, if you like that top end rush, it just depends on the feel that you're going for. Sovereign saying, I know he likes that low end punch from the 392. Absolutely. And in that respect, again, if you're just playing around with it on the street, and again, this isn't automatic that we're talking about, then yeah, that positive displacement is going to give you that initial hit that you're looking for. But keep in mind, it's not going to be like night and day, and there's going to be a lot of driver command torque playing with in there to really get it crisp. Where again, that ProCharger, when it comes on, man, it just, the way it pulls on the big end is unreal. So just depends on what you're doing with the car. Hey, Dr. Div, thank you very much, saying turbo for the win. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Anthony's saying Coyote is all big end. Absolutely. Slash is saying, does the 392 have piston squirters? Yes. Do people shut them off on certain builds? I don't think anybody's shut them off on any of the 426 builds, not that I know of anyway. Boosted Emmy saying there was a full weight Coyote at the track this weekend with a Procharger at 12 PSI, ran at 117 miles an hour in the 8th on 85, only ran 109. He went right around me. Yeah, I know. But hey, that's the world we live in now. I mean, look, that car is going to be a monster. You add boost to that equation, the ability for that thing to rev. And people say, oh, well, Coyotes love boost and 392s don't. No, everything loves boost the exact same amount. It's just that with a Coyote, those things are able to rev and rev and rev to a level that the 392 will just simply never get to, not realistically. So in that respect, again, the Procharger really kind of plays into the hand of that Coyote. And if you've ever seen the power curve differences, where a positive displacement supercharger starts off really, really strong and then will kind of trail off maybe a little bit towards the tail end of the power curve. A Procharger, in essence, a centrifugal supercharger, starts off low, but the higher you spin it, the harder you turn it, the more it wants to just keep making power. And once you get that thing spooled up, every time you shift gears and you're moving that torque curve over as far as that thing will move it over, I mean, every time you shift, you're landing at peak torque. And that's why those things just keep getting nastier and nastier fast the faster you go. It's a beautiful thing. I love them. I think they're great. All the boosts and they sound better talking about turbos. Sovereign saying Coyote's a high revving dual overhead cam engine from hell. And it sounds, yeah. So, like I say, I mean, there's a lot to be said for, being able to turn an engine that hard. And, it makes a lot of sense that it would do well regardless of what you do with it. So no matter what kind of boost you throw at it. Slash is asking, are 2-inch rod journals better for turbo apps than 2-100 journals? Not necessarily. I mean, the main thing you're looking for is oil control, oil pressure. And 2-100 versus a 2-inch, I mean, not necessarily. The difference when you start getting into rod journals is when you start seeing very large crank journal size differences. But no, I wouldn't base anything necessarily around rod journal sizes. Crank journals would be like engine to engine, and that's where you get like the very fast crank journal and rod journal too, I guess. Ideally, you're going to run the smaller bearing surface because what's known as it's the face speed, the speed at which the speed that the bearing is seeing as whatever is turning in it is spinning at its face. The bigger the diameter, the faster that surface is moving at any given RPM. And it would make sense. If you have a surface that's this big around and you're at, 1, 2, 3 RPM, you're only going so fast. If it's a much larger diameter, to go that same 1, 2, 3, you've got to move faster because the distance is further. So in that case, you would want smaller, the smaller bearing size. And this is something that would come up with like Buick 455s, Chevy small block 400s. There's a lot of different cars, big blocks, I should say, that like the Pontiac Super Duty 455 fell into this. I say a lot, but I can't really rattle off a lot. There's like 3 or 4 that come to mind, at least for me. That guys would say, well, you have oiling problems with these engines. And the reality is you didn't really have oiling problems until you tried to spin them at really high RPM. They'll handle loads really well because you've got more surface area to manage the load itself with the bearings. So there's that. That's the reason why manufacturers would go with these larger bearing sizes. Again, it's just surface area. But you have to remember, surface area creates drag. And again, you've got this pesky bearing, the face speed that you're dealing with, which can break down the shear of the oil and everything else. So the main thing to consider is if you're going with larger bearings or larger journals themselves is just to make sure you're using a quality oil that's got a high shear strength. And most of the modern, like a 040 is going to be right what you need to have at that level. Again, we're not talking about 2¼ inch bearings versus 3-inch bearings. That's really where you'd see a much bigger difference. Let's see. Oh, man, what's going on with the feed here? Let's see. Sovereign's hanging out with Dr. Diff. Let's see. Slash saying, I was thinking 3 900 stroke crank with 2 100 journals for Scat Pack. 3.9 inch stroke crank with 2 100 journals for that'd be fine. I mean, I wouldn't overthink these things, man. I really wouldn't. There's no reason to, because the more you start to overthink it, I mean, unless you're just going to be hitting this thing with a ton of nitrous or something along those lines, basically any of the ready-to-use forged kits are going to do just fine. I mean, most of those things don't ever see any more than 12 to 1400 horsepower anyway. So I don't know. Hopefully that puts your mind at ease. I just really wouldn't worry too much about it, to be honest with you. Stop hating Michael checking in. Good evening, B. Good evening, Stop. Got the arm flex with the ball guy. I like it. Slash saying huge turbos. Yeah. I'd go with the smaller bearing size then. And just use a really high quality oil. And guys, with that, we are just over 2 hours. I got to wrap it up because I got to wake up crazy early. So I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with us tonight. I couldn't do this without y'all's support, so thank you so very much. I truly do appreciate it more than you know. Love each and every one of y'all. Stay safe out there. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Keep wearing your mask. If not for yourself, then do it for others. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Can't wait to see you on the next one. If y'all are going to Texas 2K and y'all are running around out here, be safe out there. Don't want to end up with your car and yourself in jail. That's never any fun. Y'all be careful out there. That's a wrap. Adios.